Junko Furuta was a 17-year-old Japanese high school student who was abducted, raped, tortured, and murdered. Her abuse was mainly perpetrated by four male teenagers: Hiroshi Miyano, 18, Joe Ogura, 17, Shinji Minato, 16, and Yasushi Watanabe, 17, and took place over a 40-day period starting on 25 November 1988. In Japan, the case is known as the concrete-encased high school girl murder case, as her body was discovered inside of a concrete-filled drum. The prison sentences served by the perpetrators ranged from 7 to 20 years. The brutality of the case shocked Japan, and it is said to be the worst case of juvenile crime in the country's post-war history. Junko Furuta was born on January 18, 1971, and grew up in Misato, Saitama Prefecture, where she lived with her parents, her older brother, and her younger brother. At the time of her murder, she was a 17-year-old senior at Yashiominami High School. In October 1988, Furuta started working a part-time job at a plastic molding factory to save money for a graduation trip. She had already accepted a job at an electronics retailer, where she planned to work after graduating from high school. Furuta was well liked by her classmates and teachers. She had high grades and rarely missed school. According to her friends, Junko Furuta dreamed of becoming an idol singer. Junko had no idea that in just a few moments, her life would take a terrifying turn. What started that night would soon become one of the most horrifying crime cases in Japan's history. On the evening of November 25, 1988, Junko Furuta was riding her bicycle home from her part-time job. It seemed like a normal night in Misato, Saitama. At the same time, two teenage boys, Hiroshi Miyano and Shinji Minato, were riding around the area on their motorcycles. They were searching for women to attack. Following Miyano's plan, Minato suddenly attacked Junko and knocked her off her bicycle before quickly fleeing the scene. Moments later, Hiroshi Miyano approached her, pretending he had just witnessed the attack. He offered to help her and walk her home. But instead of taking her home, Miyano led her to a nearby warehouse. There, he threatened her and claimed he was connected to the Yakuza. He also raped her. That night, Miyano took Junko by taxi to a hotel in Adachi. In the early morning hours of November 26th, Miyano took her to a park near the hotel. There, three other boys were waiting. They threatened Junko, telling her that if she tried to escape, the Yakuza would harm her family. She was then taken to a house in Adachi, where she was held captive for 40 days. On November 27th, Junko Furuta's parents realized she hadn't returned home. Worried for their daughter's safety, they contacted the police and reported her missing. To stop the investigation, the kidnappers forced Junko to call her mother 3 times. During the calls, she was made to say that she had run away, but was safe and staying with friends. When Minato's parents were home, Junko was forced to pretend she was his girlfriend. But when it became clear that his parents wouldn't report them, the group stopped pretending. Later, the parents claimed they were too afraid of their own son to intervene. On the night of November 28th, the situation became far more disturbing. Miyano and several others began subjecting Junko to relentless abuse inside the house. On the night of November 28th, Miyano and the others, along with Nakamura and Ihara, gang raped Furuta. After which Miyano shaved her pubic hair with a razor and used a match to burn her genital area. In early December, as punishment for an escape attempt, the group repeatedly punched Furuta in the face, and Mayano burned her ankles with a lighter. They forced Furuta to dance to music while naked, masturbate in front of them, and stand on the balcony in the middle of the night with little clothing, and inserted objects into her vagina and anus, including a metal rod and a bottle. As the weeks passed, the group continued to torment Junko in increasingly cruel ways. She was forced to consume large amounts of alcohol, her urine, and other substances while her captors watched and laughed. In one attack in the middle of December, Furuta was beaten by the group on the pretext that Mayano had stepped on a puddle of her urine, after which he burned her thighs and hands several times with lighter fluid. By this point, Junko's suffering had become unimaginable. Overwhelmed by pain and exhaustion, she sometimes begged her captors to end her life. As December went on, Junko became dangerously weak. With almost no food and constant abuse, her body slowly began to shut down. By the end of the month, she could no longer walk. She remained trapped on the floor of the room, too weak to even stand. On January 4, 1989, everything reached its most horrifying point. After losing money in a gambling game the night before, Hiroshi Mayano returned to the house furious and decided to take out his anger on Junko. For the next 2 hours, the group continued a relentless assault. They beat her repeatedly and used objects around the room during the attack, while trying to avoid leaving evidence behind. He ignited a candle and dripped hot wax on her face, placed 2 shortened candles on her eyelids, and forced her to drink her own urine. To prevent them from being stained with blood, the group covered their hands in plastic bags before beating her with their fists and an iron exercise ball, and dropped the ball on her abdomen several times. By the end of the attack, Junko's body could no longer endure the abuse. At around 10 a.m. that morning, after weeks of unimaginable suffering, she died. Less than a day later, one of the boys realized that Junko was dead. Terrified that the truth would be discovered, the group decided to hide the body. They placed her body inside a metal drum, filled it with concrete, and drove to a deserted construction site on Wakisu Island in Tokyo. There, they dumped the barrel, hoping the crime would never be discovered. In early 1989, Hiroshi Mayano and one of his accomplices, Joe Ogura, were arrested by police. But it wasn't for Junko Furuta's case. They had been captured for the kidnapping and assault of another young woman. During the interrogation, Mayano made a critical mistake. He believed that his accomplice had already confessed to another crime, the murder of Junko Furuta. Thinking the police already knew the truth, Mayano revealed where her body had been hidden. At first, the police were confused. They had been questioning him about a completely different crime. But when officers searched the location Mayano described, they found a metal drum buried in a vacant lot. On March 29, 1989, the body inside the drum was recovered. Using fingerprint records, police confirmed the victim was Junko Furuta. Soon after, several others connected to the crime were arrested. Hiroshi Mayano was considered the leader of the group. After his arrest in 1989, the court sentenced him to 20 years in prison. He remained behind bars until 2009, when he was finally released. Joe Ogura was another key participant in the crime. The court sentenced him to around 8 years in prison. He was later released in the mid-1990s after serving his sentence. Shinji Minato was also arrested after the investigation exposed the group. Because he was a minor at the time of the crime, the court sentenced him to between 5 and 9 years in juvenile detention. Yasushi Watanabe was another member of the group involved in the crime. He was also sentenced to juvenile detention for several years, before eventually being released in the early 2000s. Even after committing one of the most disturbing crimes in Japan's history, all of the perpetrators eventually walked free. When the details of the crime became public, the entire nation of Japan was shocked. People could not believe that such cruelty had taken place. When the court sentences were announced, many people were outraged. They believed the punishments were far too lenient for such a horrific crime. Junko Furuta was only 17 years old. Her tragic story would become one of the most disturbing criminal cases in Japan's history. Even decades later, the case continues to haunt the public memory, a reminder of how terrifying human cruelty can be. Some crimes are so horrifying that the world refuses to forget them.